for suffering succotash. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, my name's StepsBasic, and welcome back to my community show. The show where we take about a few minutes to stop playing video games just in order to talk about video games and, well, the community around them. Anyway, so today is part 3 of my ongoing series of parts of a good game. But today, you guys are in for a treat, because we have a bit of a double feature today. Yep. But that's only because this part kind of is more along the lines of parts of a good video game rather than just parts of a good story like I've been doing recently. And I wanted to include this because it is an honest critique of certain video games. Or at least certain types of video games. So, anyway, the double feature today is story and gameplay. Now, the reason it's a double feature is because some games do not find the good balance between story and gameplay. Rather, they'll go either full-on gameplay or full-on story. And, while technically not bad per se, it's not generally my cup of tea. But anyway, let's get into this. So, story. We'll start with story first and talk about it because this is probably the most lengthy part of my story. My video. What makes a story? Well, for those of you who don't know, a story is literally the progression of events and how or what is expected of said characters in the game or book or movie or, any other media that's there. Now, story is quite possibly one of the two things that qualify video games for art, in my opinion. The first being, of course, story, and the second being graphics, which I'll talk about in a later episode. I'm not going to talk about it too awful much on account of the fact that I have virtually no experience in graphics and whatnot, but it is what it is. Parts of a story. Well, we have the beginning, the middle, and the end, obviously. The very basic understanding of what makes up a story. Let's break it down a little bit further. My monitor was on. Anyway, let's break it down a little bit better. So, when we look at a story, we look at the beginning. The beginning is the literal introduction to the characters, the setting, the plot, everything. Introduction to everything. This is your first steps into the story. And that's where you gotta start, Perfect, right? Very easily understood. The middle is where things start ramping up. We see the climax, we see the general conflict, we start to understand who the bad guys are, we start to understand our characters a little more. Everything is just ramping up. Then it hits the climax, and then it starts to go down towards the end of the story, which is where we start to wrap up storylines, start to end things, start to answer questions, and eventually bring everything to a close, right? That's how it works. That's how endings work. But of course, that's not always necessarily how it works. Good stories manage to integrate and blend all of these features in very well, very smoothly, rather than like, this is the introduction. Hi, I am so-and-so. I am doing this. This is the middle. We are going to go do this. Blah, blah, blah. We have encountered a problem. Oh my gosh. Oh no. And then, end. Well, that wrapped up nicely, didn't it? Very clunky, very blah. It happens. But you can also start to blend it in so much that you'll start to see certain aspects in, like, the beginning. You'll see parts that should be in the middle, and middle you'll see parts that might be in the end or in the beginning and stuff like that. And sometimes you'll just see them swapped around a bit. And there's certain places where it works out, start at the end, then flash back to the beginning, and, it's cool. You'll see things like when you start a video game and you're thrust immediately into the action to hook you in there and get you, like, everything's blowing up all around you and you don't know what the heck's going on, who you are, where you're doing this, and all that stuff. And then we move into the middle where you start to learn who the characters are and what's going on. And, I kind of like it like that sometimes. I know it's meant to be a hook to get you involved in the story, get you involved in the game, and, like, help you enjoy it. And it works, for the most part, on me. Sometimes you'll see in the middle where they'll start wrapping up storylines and start ending things before you even get to the end of the story. And technically not a bad idea, especially if you're going to throw in a big twist at the end. And, sometimes that happens. Twists are good. I like twists. unexpected twists. Though I see a lot of twists that I expect. It isn't a twist if I expect it anymore, right? And then sometimes in the end, the story won't end. You'll be left with things called cliffhangers and all sorts of frustration. And these sorts of things, sometimes they're building up to a sequel. Sometimes they just want to leave it there, leave it open to your imagination. A good thing was, a good story that did this, I know it's not a video game, but it's a book, was The Giver. The original Giver, the book, ended in such a vague way as to leave the interpretation of the ending up to the reader. Did he die? Did he not die? Did he actually make it somewhere? Is there something beyond? All that fun stuff. And I like stories like that, but I am very much a conclusive type of person. If there's going to be a sequel, good. If there's not going to be a sequel, end the story. I know, nitpicky, but that's my own take. Another thing, a bad ending can really ruin a story. I know. It's all about the destination and not the journey, but seriously, if you get a bad ending, Mass Effect 3, you can... it just makes the whole journey seem worthless. I know. Nitpicky again. Alright, so let's move on to gameplay. Well, gameplay is where you start to see your classification of game really defined. Your RPGs, your first-person shooters, your action-adventures, your platformers, all these types of games. This is where they are defined in the type of gameplay that you see. Now, you get like your turn-based combats in your traditional Japanese role-playing games, and you'll see your action-adventure RPGs, which will lead you to full-on, everything's moving, everything's going, you're fighting and attacking and whatnot. That's more traditional Western role-playing games. Things like Skyrim and Fallout, those are Western role-playing games, and they have the more full action sequences. Now then you have your action games, which are just your character running through, killing, shooting, blowing things up, things like Grand Theft Autos and whatnot. Because there's no real level up system, you have no customization for your characters, and you're basically just following the story throughout while shooting bad guys and having fun. And those things can work. And then you have your adventure games, which are basically you take item, rub it against something, see if it solves the puzzle. If not, move on, find another thing to rub it on. And I like adventure games, by the way. And I know I'm minimalizing them with my description, but that's essentially it. You find items, you try them out in various locations and hope they work. And then you have your platformer games, which are full-on movement, and everything is based around the mechanics of the game. Running, jumping, can you fly, can you use your telekinesis to trigger things in the distance, stuff like that. Very, very puzzle-heavy type of games. And these can be easily the most frustrating games out there. Very, very rage-inducing, because it's based heavily on mechanics. Things you got like Octodad was a platformer type, where you're using the mechanics of the octopus to walk around, and it's very confusing. I Am Bread. Another one. Oh God. Flashbacks. Oh. Anyway, in case you don't know me, you've been watching my channel forever and you don't understand this yet, my favorite types of games are RPGs. RPGs are very Japanese RPGs, to be more specific, but I do like Western RPGs because I like customizable characters. I like customizable parties. I like the story tailored to fit me, and I like to go through it with my my crew and get to know them and get to love them and get to enjoy it. Obviously Final Fantasy VII, favorite RPG, favorite Japanese RPG ever. Favorite RPG in general, Final Fantasy VII, always tops the list. But that's like a close second to certain, or a close first to certain games like Legend of Legaia and Legend of Dragoon and games like that. You get your party, you get to choose who you want, you get to customize their outfits, you get to make or not outfits, but armor, and you know what I'm saying, and their magic and their spells, and are they an attacker and whatnot, and I love those. Western RPGs definitely have a lot more customization, but you lose the whole party aspect to it. Skyrim, you have your character, you literally build them from the ground up, and you make them look all fancy and awesome and stuff, and I love that. Very customizable, amazing, perfect. But As most of you know, I'm also a big fan of stories. And so RPGs, JRPGs are very, very story heavy, less combat heavy. And that's kind of why I like them to Western RPGs. And same, I love adventure games because they involve a lot of story. But that leads us into the balance of story versus gameplay. And this is where a few games fall short. Conflict cannot resolve itself in a game. That's why you're here. Now, for the most part, most games get it right. There are some games where you're literally just walking around learning the story. And, you know, I'm cool with that. Sometimes you can enjoy the story. Sometimes you can enjoy the scenery. And then you're watching a movie and you can't enjoy the scenery as much because you're moving to the next scene. And in some games like that, you're just like, look at all these wonderful fishes around me. Or, my, those are pretty glowing orbs. But there's no threat. There's no, I'm going to lose. Or if I don't, you know, do something right, I'm going to fail. And that is where it stops being a game and starts being an interactive movie. And, you know, to me, a game needs a challenge. A game needs to be gameplay. It needs gameplay. Otherwise, it's not a game. It's just a movie. And, you know, I'm fine with interactive movies as long as you call them interactive movies rather than, you know, games. Because they're not games if you're not playing. You're just along for the ride, then it's a movie. That's the difference. Of course, you know, that's not to discredit the games themselves. Because, like, I was playing Absu and, you know, I was ranting a little bit. And then I got intrigued because the story is good. I just think that in certain cases, these things would be better suited to a movie. But of course, there's also the whole gameplay without a story. And these are just casual games, idle games, you know, sitting on the toilet playing Tetris. And, you know, I'm going to bash a whole genre here of, like, Candy Crushes and whatnot. But I don't want a story when I'm sitting there pooping because I just want to play my game and kill the time until I'm done. Now, there are some interesting little aspects to these little casual games that make them kind of fun, you know, playing Candy Crush. Oh, am I going to get this little girl to the next area, or is she going to get stuck on level 365 for hours and days and months and weeks and years? But honestly, for the most part, I don't play those games for the story. I play the games because they pass the time. And finding the good balance between gameplay and story is important to me. And, like, that's why I didn't hate Outlast. I hate games that are basically just interactive stories because they're not games. And Outlast, there was a threat to your survival. You could die. If you don't move fast enough, this guy will catch you. It's not like you're on rails and you're going to succeed no matter what, because you can literally get stuck in a corner and not run away. And now, I don't like it because of that I have combat, because anybody, it doesn't matter if you're Miles Upshur, an investigative reporter, anybody is going to fight back if they get attacked. And if you're getting attacked and you don't fight back, that breaks the immersion. And that, to me, is as important as the story itself, if you can get immersed in the story. Now, I will not go on and harp about how combat is necessary, because some games don't have combat and some games don't make it necessary. Adventure games, you don't always fight back. You find crafty, sneaky ways around things. That's why I like them, preferably to certain other games, which are just story. Because you still have interaction. You are still solving puzzles. You are still seeing which works with what. In some games, of course, it doesn't really make a lot of sense what you're using. Anyway, I think that's all the rambling I'm going to give for you today. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you liked it, go and poke that like button. Yeah, go comment down below. Tell me about your favorite types of games. If you like RPGs, first-person shooters, what, when, why, and how, and all that stuff. And, you know, I'll get back to you as soon as I can, if I can. You know, all that jazz. And, yeah. Tune in next time when we're going to be talking about something else. Maybe. I don't know. Maybe we'll talk about the same thing. We always do that, right? And until then...